Hey there, hope you're doing well. In this video, I want to talk about remote work. I've done some videos in the past about them, but I'll just talk about a different aspect of remote work. I've been doing remote work for I don't know, over like 12, maybe close to 15 years now, give or take. So I've done this for a long time and I absolutely enjoy doing remote work. Even over the years, I've gone to client sites, just to meet up with my client when I kick off a project, or maybe once a week, just to meet with the team and such. But I like to work in my own space. Doesn't matter how big, small, how less fancy it is. I just enjoy the ability to think in my own space, in the quietness, right? Just as a developer, as an architect, it gives me that level of comfort to be able to do what I can do in a space that I'm very comfortable in. That it's just my office room, right? And for each of us, it's different. Some of us work in the kitchen, some of us could be working on the deck. If it's summertime, if the weather is good, we all have a place where we think best, and different times of the day too, right? I'm generally very nocturnal, so I work into the night. Getting up early is very challenging for me, and early in my definition is actually not early for a lot of people. So working at nighttime works very well. So working remotely has a lot of these types of advantages, and given the situation we all find ourselves in, and hopefully things get much better. A lot of us might go back to the works to our workplaces, but I think remote work is here to stay, right? I think there's a seismic shift in people's approaches to solving engineering problems. So this is as good a time as any to having this discussion or this conversation. So what is I probably will do a series of videos on this. Let me call this one of N, like I usually do for remote work. What is one of the first things that we might encounter, which is getting a job, right? Getting that contract, or getting that whatever type of engineering work that you do, interviewing for that work. And as an engineer, as a developer, as an architect, I do hands-on work all day long, all week long, and all month long, and all year long. So my interviews are generally technical interviews, right? Whether I'm trying to find someone to help me, or I'm trying to help someone else, and a developer or an architect or any of those capacities. And a lot of times there's no designation. People are like, hey Krish, I need some engineering help, can you help me? And the nature of work, this just spans the spectrum. That's when you get started with the work. But when you do interview, it's generally they're reaching out to you for a specific problem. At least in their minds it's specific, even though it gets much broader as you get started with the work. So you're going to have these technical interviews, and the nature of those interviews have changed over the years, sometimes gradually and sometimes exponentially. But I've seen that in the recent past, in the last 2 to 6 months, it's been very different, right? Almost all of my technical interviews have been, not all, like I would say a good majority of them, over 70% of them have had an element of coding involved in the interviews. I generally volunteer to doing a project, depending on whether you're doing node work, or React work, or mobile work, or web work, or API, or front end. I generally volunteer saying, hey, what, would it help you if I just built a small app, really tiny one, and then we can dig deeper into the quality of the code that I wrote, and so on and so forth. And a lot of times clients pick up on that offer because they want to be able to see what you've done. But not everybody encourages that, because sometimes they have a rigid set of rules and definitions. They need you to be solving their projects or problems so they can assess all candidates on a fair basis, right? Which is understandable too. So a lot of the interviews might have a coding element. I mean, they are technical, and people do. They tend to get overwhelmed when it's a technical interview. I don't know how it works in other types of other industries, or even in other positions within our engineering industry. But as a developer or as an architect, you are tested all the time, right? And people are going to ask you these technical questions, and I know people can get a little worked up and nervous and anxious when they go to these interviews. And the purpose of this video, even though I'm 4 minutes in, is to tell you that you probably don't want to be, because if you become nervous or anxious, you're just going to not do your best, right? You want to put your best foot forward, and even if you can't do that because people are judging you, and that's the purpose of these interviews, you still want to give it your best, not worrying about people judging you. So what are some of the things you could possibly do to present yourself in the best possible manner? The first thing is, try not to, the more you do it, the less worried you're going to be, right? So many years ago when I went to these initial interviews, I would have been more nervous or anxious than I might be today. Because you've not done enough of those. So as you go through a lot of these interviews, and as you put yourself in the line of fire, as get more and more people to judge you as you grow in your career, and as you grow older, I think it becomes easier because you sort of become immune to these judgments. Because it's very hard if you put yourself in the other person's shoes, because I interview to find help all the time as well. It's not easy. But if you've done this for a while, I mean, personally, it takes me like 5 minutes to tell if that individual, the person, can or cannot help me. It doesn't matter whether they've worked on this particular language or the framework. Like right now, I'm working on some Dart work. So I'm not the kind of person who only looks for Dart engineers or Flutter engineers, because I truly believe that if you're a good engineer, you could pick up anything, right? It's not, I mean, it might take a little bit of time, but that's completely all right, and it's worth the investment for the company to hire those good, committed, passionate engineers, because they will pick up the stack in no time. So there could be two schools of thought. There could be one school of thought which is, hey, I only want to hire somebody who's done what I'm looking for them to do, and has done that for a long period of time, which is all right. Depends on your project and depends on your school of thought, but that's not the school of thought that I've subscribed to. I would any day work with an engineer who's committed, passionate, and has the right attitude, and who's done great quality work in the past, even if it's not in this particular stack, because stacks change all the time. And if you're doing UI and front-end work, they change way too frequently, right? Like every few months there's something happening. And even if you take JavaScript on the server side, like Node, there's a new framework that's popping up all the time. Some things change more frequently than others, so I wouldn't be worried about a language or a framework or a library. So have that mindset when you go as an interviewee as well, because you're not trying to no one should be trying to test your memory. There shouldn't be trick questions, right? The purpose of an interview is to make sure that you have the aptitude, you have the skills, so you can help the company, and the company, it's the responsibility of the company and the folks representing that company for them to figure out if you as a candidate, as a potential employee, can help them solve their problems, and if you fit into the paradigms of their organization. There should be no trickery or trick questions here, right? It should just be very straightforward conversations. But where people get even more nervous is when there are live coding interviews. I feel strongly about them too, right? I've done a large number of them over the years, but when I'm actually writing that line of code, even during a live interview, I like to stop sharing my screen, because I need that freedom to think. I need that space. I need that privacy as an engineer in my brain to be able to make some decisions. If I'm writing a line of code, my syntax, because you could have been writing like Ruby code, and then the interview might be a React interview, or you might be doing like React development, and then the interview might be a Rails interview, right? So a lot of us do work across stacks on a daily basis. So syntactically, it might take us the extra 10, 20, 30, 40 seconds or 5, 10 minutes to just get our feet wet with that particular language. And maybe it's a language that we've not worked on in the recent past. So I don't think we should be worried about them judging us about the syntax. At the same time, I'm comfortable when I'm actually, even during a live coding interview, when I'm actually writing the code, I want to stop sharing. That's my preference. And it works like 8 out of 10 times, because the folks on the other side totally understand that. But there have been occasions where people are like, nope, I actually want to see you write, which is very tricky. I do give it a shot, because, honestly, I don't care. If you want to judge, be my guest. But I think what doesn't help is it doesn't give me the freedom to think to the extent that I would otherwise. So I think it's not fair, because I'm not able to put the best foot forward from an interviewer as an interviewee to the interviewer. So I think they're unfortunately going to have to make those judgments based on things that I may be doing differently from the real world environment, which is you writing code with nobody watching over your shoulders. Or even if you're doing pair programming, it's you working with co-workers, and you're not worried about them judging you. You get to know the team, and when you know them, when you know the other person or the group of people, it's much easier to do pair programming. If you put somebody in the line of fire, do pair programming with a bunch of strangers, or do mob programming, it doesn't work for everybody, right? Not for all of us. For some of us, it might work work occasionally at during some percentage of those windows, but for others it may not work at all. So I think it's a collaborative effort. This is a broader topic, so I want to talk a lot more about it. In the next one, I'll just talk a whole lot more about live coding interviews and what are some pros and cons, and how you might want to address them both as an interviewer and as an interviewee. And again, before I end the video, if you haven't signed up on snowpal.com, do so. Be productive, be organized. Check out our apps on the app and Play stores, and have a good weekend. Thank you.